Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Melman Podcast. My name is Zach Marzo.
David Melman.
David Melman is here, as usual. Very excited this morning. We have Joel and Todd from Mike Moon Studio. I'm going to let them explain, obviously, what they do best. But it is about weddings, the big wedding season, photography, videography. Their videos are super awesome. But I want you guys to introduce yourself, kick it off. Tell us, who is Mike Moon, or what is Mike Moon? Who you guys are and what you guys do. I think I'm excited.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us.
Yeah, man, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I'll jump in with the origin story because I was kind of in from the beginning. And so, Mike Moon Studio, it all started kind of as an idea years ago. I've always been in business. I've always had small businesses. Just love business. Sure. Absolutely love business. And also kind of in college, I did, building sets in the theater, things like that. So business mind, but I like the creative. And so I think in the back of my mind, I had always been looking for something that was more in the creative field that I could get into and do something with. And so kind of circling back, I got married myself about, 13 years ago or so now.
Sure.
And we had a lot of problems with my wedding. Photo particularly, just like, for instance, it took me 7 months to get my photos back after the wedding.
Yeah.
And I started looking at the wedding industry as a whole, and I really liked the industry. And what I saw was there were so many photographers out there that all worked right by themselves. And, you've got 2 or 3 national brands that kind of do it, but vast majority of the industry working right by themselves. They're doing everything from bookkeeping to
the whole nine.
Editing the weddings, shooting the weddings, kind of doing all of it. And I said, you know what? That's not really what they're good at. I see that so much in small business where you've got an entrepreneur that they're really good at plumbing, or they're really good at cooking food, or they're good at this or that, but they're not great at running a business. And so you see in kind of the artist world, they struggle a lot because they're artists, they're creative, they're, they miss that side. So I said, you know what, if we came in and we built a structure for the artist so that the things that they do struggle with a little bit more, like the marketing and doing the taxes and, just all those things that go along with everyday business, we could take care of some of that. And kind of going back to the, it taking 7 months for me to get my photos back, it's just because they're all working by themselves and they get overwhelmed and behind. And so we came in, we put a structure in place and started growing it. So how the company actually started, I actually met a guy named Mike Moon when I was first looking into this. And he was one of those small photographers that kind of, he shot so many weddings a year, had another job on the side, that sort of thing. And I just came in and rolled up my sleeves. And in 5 years, I actually bought Mike out in 2017. So you ask, who is Mike?
Yeah.
He was the original partner.
Nice.
Okay. But then Todd came in before he fully got out and, just kind of went from there. Todd, when did you become a partner?
I became a partner about 2.5 years ago. I actually, I bought a portion of his shares too, and then Joel bought out the rest of them. Was it 2017? And it's been the two of us for the last 2.5 years or so, 2.5, 3 years.
Sure.
And a lot's changed in that time. And but yeah,
I'd say in a 6-year span or a 5-year span, we went from your typical individual photographer to, what do we shoot now, Todd? 350 events a year?
Yeah, we shoot about 350 events between.
Wow.
That's insane. Two in a day sometimes, right? For those numbers?
Up to between 7 and 10 on a day sometimes. So
Killer.
Wow.
It just depends on time of year, is it wedding season, things like that. During the off season, occasionally we'll do some corporate events. Sometimes we'll do some commercial work. But 99.8% of our business is the wedding industry. So you're looking at engagement seasons during engagement sessions during certain parts of the year, weddings during others, and then it's pretty much always booking season. So,
and what were you guys? What was Mike doing before? I mean, before you jumped in and put your hands in there.
So before it was your typical individual photographer. little north of 20 weddings a year, something like that. And just, he ran a commercial studio at the time and did this. And so it was pretty much your typical studio. So
Sure.
My whole thought was if we basically found a way to, like in any business, what you're wanting is consistency. What you're wanting is to be able to give the same product over and over and over again. And so kind of our whole thing that developed was a lighting style. We call it Moonlight. It's basically really good off-camera flash, but it's more than that. It's the way that it's done and how it's done. And so what happens with our shooters is when they come on board, they've been typically shooting weddings for years already, and then we take about 6 to 8 months to dial them into that specific look and style and feel.
Right.
And then they become one of our primary shooters. So, as a client, when you come in, you're assigned to a photographer. You have a relationship. It's just like going out and booking an individual.
Right.
The only difference is if something happens, what's every bride's biggest fear about the photographer on the wedding day? What if they don't show up?
Correct.
Yeah.
And you've only got one. So the way we do it, we have backups in place where even if, let's say, Umreen or Peter's shooting the wedding and Peter's at the park 2 days before and trips and sprains his ankle, we can jump in.
And hopefully they still shoot with a sprained ankle, but if he breaks his
right.
leg,
Then you get him a scooter.
a sprained ankle, that's not much. But in the event,
exactly,
severe sprain.
So with that, I'm sure there's a game plan per the bride and groom of where they want to direct the photography more or less, or do you guys kind of navigate that? Because what if there's a game plan lined up for this photographer, they've planned it, focused X amount on the children and us and blah, blah, blah. What if, is that person going to pick up the game plan and run with it?
Absolutely. Todd, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, so it all comes down to consistency again. And when it goes back to, when Joel came in talking about it, and I'll answer your question, it's kind of a lead up to it, but even when the photographers are good at everything, it's just like they may not be passionate about all aspects of it.
Right.
So it slips through the cracks. They're not taking, certain notes. They're not getting in contact with people. So we have a process for everything we do, from the time the lead comes in to the time, how long it takes us to contact them, to the consultation. Our photographer, we generally pitch a photographer, and after they're booked, the photographer will do an initial call, introduce themselves. They get to know that photographer, and that's the person they'll be in contact with over the next year.
Cool.
And the photographer's taking notes in the background. They're figuring out who they are as a person, dislikes, what they're looking for in the wedding, and then about a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before the wedding, they're doing the final consultation. So they're looking at timeline, the shot lists, Pinterest. Brides love putting together shots that they want on Pinterest.
Oh, yeah.
So we get those lists. We finalize that timeline because a lot of times coordinators will put together a typical timeline, and 9 times out of 10 it works. But occasionally a bride will want something that we need to move something around.
Sure.
And that's where the photographer will come in and say, I think we're going to need an extra 30 minutes here. We're taking those notes. Those notes come into our studio. So we're, again, documentation everywhere. So in the event that Peter does sprain his ankle, break his leg, or whatever, we have all those notes we can pick up right where they left off. And it's one of those things that you just don't, as Joel would say, it's that peace of mind that you can't get anywhere else. The prime example actually happened to me when I first came into the studio. It's one of those things, you hear the pitch, it's just like everyone shoots the same look, style, and feel. We've got backups. And I remember coming in, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. It's a little gimmicky, but whatever. But then it happened to me because I was shooting a wedding. It was about 4.5 years ago now. And I had bronchitis. The doctor gave me a steroid and something else, and my body just didn't react to it very well. My pulse ox dropped to like 72%.
Jeez.
I was losing gaps of time. I remember we had a photographer, Justin, at the time. And I went up to him and I said, hey, man, let me know when we have 10 or 15 minutes. I was shooting video. I need to go mic up the groom and the officiant. And he thought I was messing with him, and he's just like, oh, it's fine. And then 5 more minutes go on, and I'm going and like, no, really, I'm going to need about 10 minutes just to be safe. He's like, dude, we shot the ceremony like 30 minutes ago. What are you talking about? and then I started freaking out, and sure enough, I had mics on the groom and the officiant. I don't remember shooting the ceremony at all. Wow. And I called Joel, and I remember I I was crying. I was like, I have no idea what's going on. I mean,
Right.
you're terrified, not knowing.
You can't rewind that day.
You can't rewind
You
it.
can't, right?
I was terrified not only for the couple because I wasn't sure if I shot it, if I was recording, if anything, but also I was just terrified because I don't remember it. It was like blacking out in the middle of the day for no reason. Right. And Joel basically hung up on me. He said, give me 5 seconds. And he hung up on me, and within 30 minutes, we had another videographer there to relieve me. I did record. We did get the audio, but it was one of those. Yeah. And it wasn't until about an hour after I left that the couple said, like, where's Todd? We haven't seen Todd since the ceremony. And
don't worry.
Don't worry.
He's at the hospital.
He's in the ER. He's totally fine. And when we edited it all together, because we all do shoot the same look, style, and feel, you had no idea that a shooter went to the emergency room right in the middle of it. It just flowed perfectly. And that's when I was officially sold. I'm like, this is something really special. And that's when I became fully vested, at least mentally at that point, where I'm just like, okay, this is special. We're going to do big things here. And it completely changed my mindset about what those things that Mike Moon Studio promises. And that's all, that's part of our pitch. It's just like, a lot of people talk about their style. Joel, when he does consultations, he rarely talks about the style. Like if you watch, we have a video on our website that Joel goes in length in about what's special about us. He doesn't talk about the style because if you're there, you already like the style. We talk about those tangible things that make us different. And we basically head on the fears. We hit those fears that most brides have head on. We just don't even waste time with it. And by acknowledging those fears, you can kind of alleviate some of those pressure points, those anxieties of the wedding day. Sometimes they don't even think about those things. Like, I didn't even think about a photographer not showing up, or I didn't even think about photos taking 7 months. And Joel just hits that head on.
You're anticipating your client's needs
before they even
offense
ask.
versus defense. And we tell that to our team all the time: offense versus defense. Don't let the client ask you a question when you know they're going to ask you. Ask them or engage with them to potentially dissolve a bad situation, and you're make sure the client knows you're aware of it. Doesn't mean you have to think negative. You're aware of it, right? There's an art between communicating to where you're aware of it versus them thinking you're negative Nancy, right? So if you can alleviate that from their mind and then show all this kind of, forwardness to show how active and prepared you guys are, it's a game changer. Because most people think businessmen, women, or artists, it's hard to have both. And in the beginning, you described both. And it's hard to have both in any business, whether you're a doctor and a good businessman, a lawyer.
No one's good at everything.
It's hard, right? But if you can put two together and execute with structure, which seems like you guys have structure lined up to the T, and that's why you win. I mean, from the 20 a year to 350, sure, your mindset is to keep growing, but when the foundation is strong enough to support that growth, we're not overextended either.
And that maybe we talked a little bit about this, Todd, is the weddings specifically, that's been like your niche for a while. Are you guys sticking with that? Are you doing, anything outside of that? I don't know if that's something you want to chat about.
Yeah. So we've been doing weddings for a long time. I mean, Mike Moon Studio has been around for a decade or so. And we're getting into this place where over the last 5 years, I have to tip my hat off to Joel here, because Joel is an expert at identifying opportunity, identifying weaknesses. And we have created a foundation really, really strong. And, there's obviously things that every business will always have to improve on, but it's one of those, that's his bread and butter. And that's honestly, before we get into that, it's, I think especially when you're dealing with business partners, it is a marriage. Right. And we are very similar in our goals, but we're very different in our approach. And he is honestly more of the business side. I'm more of the artsy side. We both have aspects of both. Like when you talk about his college experience building sets, obviously very artsy guy. We both started businesses when we were kids. So we both have those aspects. But when it comes to the partnership, it's staying in your lane. And I respect what he does. He respects what I do. And we just kind of trust each other in that way. And then now that we have a really, really solid foundation over the last 5 years that we've built together, now we're looking at, we're listening to our couples on the things that they need or the things that they want. Sure. And we have a great relationship with our couples. And one of the things that they ask about all the time is, family sessions, newborn sessions. It's the natural progression. You get married within 5 years, 10 years, you're having a baby. We had a photographer, filmmaker, and she is a phenomenal newborn photographer. We've teamed up with a girl named Nikki Saladino.
Cool.
And she goes by Deborah Nicole. She's she's known nationally now.
Wow.
As a newborn photographer. We've partnered with her.
Cool.
Very similar concept as Mike Moon Studio, but on the newborn side. And her work is just absolutely beautiful. We're super, super excited to be
Do they
working with
give
her.
you some photographers come in like big head, like, no, this is the better way, and then they're arguing with you guys about the look you want? Obviously, there's no fit there, but I don't know how artists, I don't see them being, super aggressive in that way, but I don't know,
Not really.
No.
Mainly because we have a standard.
Right.
We know exactly who we are. We know exactly what our product is. And it's nothing against other photographers, other filmmakers.
It's just not your fit.
Yeah, and that's totally okay. It's totally okay. And we want to push people where they excel. And if they're not going to excel here, we want what's best for them too. We even have filmmakers now that we know long-term don't, they want to go off and do bigger and better things, and that's fantastic when their times come.
Right.
It comes. But yeah, if somebody's coming in and they're fighting us on style, even if a couple comes in and say, we love your foundation, but we want to change the style. I'm just like, well, there's a reason why we're so consistent. There's a reason why we do the things we do. There's a reason why we have a 14-day turnaround with photos.
Right.
There's a reason why we have backups, and it's because everything is so systematic and we can just do it time and time
works.
again.
Yeah, it works.
So we don't want to throw a wrench into the system.
No, it works. It works.
I was going to say, kind of to add to that, if the photographer makes it into the company, they have the right personality fit. Yeah. They're not the type that are going to fight the style very much.
Sure.
What you run into more is their natural habits. If you don't, we struggled with that a little bit in the very beginning, where people will get onto the style and then their natural habits will slowly start taking back over. And the way we dealt with that is more systems. It's quality control. It's, even though Todd no longer has to edit, he still checks every single wedding that comes through the company. And we have a plan to expand it beyond Todd as we get bigger. And so it's like one of those where we can identify the things that are getting off way before a couple could or anybody from the outside could. And we're constantly working with our photographers, constantly coaching, constantly providing educational opportunities. And the other cool thing about having a big team like that is the collaboration effort. You'll have a photographer that just tries something at a wedding, and it's just magic. And then not only do they have it, but it spreads through the entire company, and now all our couples get to experience this cool new technique or shot that we found. So you've got that community aspect as well.
Absolutely.
Cool. So you guys are actively tweaking when needed and adjusting always, right?
Absolutely.
Yep. And we embrace our photographers' needs to be creative. So we have a baseline. That's where our consistency comes from.
Where do you find the typical photographer? Instagram, they reach out to you, friends.
Yeah, it comes from all over.
Yes.
It comes from all over. Sure. And we joke that it's kind of like the Harvard of wedding photography, because it's extremely hard to become a photographer with us.
Cool. You set the standard high, right?
We do. We probably get 200 applications every year to become a photographer. Sure. And it's lucky if one or two makes it through to become a primary, because it's a process. I mean, everyone starts the same way. It doesn't matter if you're a new photographer or an experienced wedding photographer for 15 years. You start off as an assistant. It's how they learn the workflow of how we work. It's how we communicate with the coordinators, because we're all a team. A lot of photographers will go in and it's about their timeline and their shots, and you have to work with the venues. You have to work with the coordinators. It's mutual respect all around. It's how we communicate, how we work with our videographers. And then they go from that to training with and becoming a second shooter. And then over a course of a period of time, if they have all of the tangibles that we need from them, we can release them into becoming a primary. But there are basically three things that we require for them. And one, First and foremost, they have to be good people. You know, it's easy to fake being a good person in an interview. It's hard to fake being a good person for 8 months, especially when you're going through the assistant process, the training process, second shooter, and then primary. So first and foremost, good person. Second, you have to have a skill set. We have a ton of talent, and we're right here next to Atlanta. Tons of talent. So being a good person and talent are easy, but there's the other side of it is just being, what's the term you like to use? It's basically the ability to take charge in situations. So like, so on the wedding day, I don't know if you've ever been to a wedding, and you're sitting during cocktail hour after the ceremony, and you're like, man, when are we going to start? Like, I'm hungry. I want like, let's get the ball rolling. 9 times out of 10, that's the photographer's fault. They're not managing the timeline really well.
Interesting.
So you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting. And a lot of that is not necessarily, it's the photographer's fault, but what's happening is people are excited. They're in cocktail hour. It's usually the bridal party. The men have been drinking a little bit. They're a little all over the place. And
Never.
and you have to be able to wrangle them in. You've got to be able to stand up on a chair and be like, guys, listen, put the beers down for 5 minutes. We're going to knock these pictures out, and then we'll get you off to party all night. But if you don't have that assertiveness, that's the word. If you don't have that assertiveness to take charge in those situations, then the bridal party, the families, they'll just run all over you.
That's
and,
right.
That's one of those things that you have to have. It's like the non-negotiable. And that's where a lot of our photographers that don't make it through, that's where it kind of crashes.
Right there. Yeah, interesting. You have artists, and then you have also being assertive. You know, it's a very unique personality.
David talks about this all the time, though. Like, somebody comes in, they've been, with another firm for 5 years, and he's like, that's awesome, but you've been with our system, 0 days. So it's retraining them. Like you said, 15-year photographer, that's cool. We still start you at the bottom to know our system, and you go from there, and that's why a lot of times we don't even look for other people maybe that necessarily have a ton of experience. If, depending on their role, obviously you can't hire an inexperienced attorney, but somebody on the customer service side or whatever, good people, reliable, all of that stuff. But then they have to start, everybody wants to come in and be, next to the top in line. Like, you have to go through the ranks.
You have to work your way in.
Regardless of what your experience is.
And follow the system. We have systems in place every day to be successful. If you think your idea will make it better, I'll always hear it.
Absolutely.
But you also need to understand, if I hear it and I don't like it, don't take it personal.
Right.
That's the key too. It's too much personal and emotional interaction when it comes to a business decision where it makes sense. If it makes sense, you could change everything in my office. I'm all for it. I don't want to be the only person thinking in there all the time. How much pressure is on your shoulders, always being the one to innovate and think? Isn't it a breath of fresh air when somebody else is going to innovate and bring ideas to you? I think it's one of the best feelings, even better than closing a deal or having a big account, when your team starts thinking for themselves, and then you can think pretty much outside of what they're thinking of, other things to make their life better and growth and more opportunity.
It's funny you bring that up. I think back to one of the moments that I knew that we were onto something and that this was becoming something different. And I was actually on, I think I went on a trip to Alaska. I was on a cruise or something. I was out of town, and I came back. I had cut my phone off for, I think, 15 days. Didn't answer it. Didn't even turn it on.
Impressive.
And I came back, and not only was everything running, but we had made sales. There was a customer complaint that had been completely dealt with that I didn't have to deal with when I got back. And it's that, I know exactly what you're talking about. You get to that point to where it's all good in theory, but then it starts to becoming reality. It's becoming a business. It's becoming this thing, this life of its own. And honestly, it's a lot about empowering your people.
It is the right people. It's the right people, because you need to make sure you're empowering the people that can handle it, not abuse it at times, and that happens, I love people, don't get me wrong, but everybody I meet, like, I got to know you first before I flow you. Everybody, I don't care if it's family or a distant cousin, means nothing to me. How are you? Are you a good person? Are you a good person? That's such a big question, right?
And I find that no matter no matter how hard you work to make that happen, things are going to slip through. People are going to get through.
Right.
But that's where it comes back to the systems and the checks and balances and making sure that there's always a way. Human nature is always going to take over.
Yeah.
If you don't give somebody any kind of guidelines, any kind of supervision, it's going to continually go in a direction.
It will.
But as long as you have that stuff in place where, it's just like we were talking about with the photographers and how occasionally one will start reverting in style a little bit.
Right.
And the reason that doesn't happen is because we see it on the very first wedding that it happens 2%, and we're going, we have to fix this.
Immediately.
See the pattern immediately.
See
Good.
it. You have to. The whole key to business is being able to not being in the dark, being able to understand and see things from a distance, and have things in place, KPIs and things that really point out where you are all the time, and will kind of let you know when something's off, and you deal with it immediately because you stagnate, you're going to die.
Eliminate
you quit
assumptions.
innovating.
Isn't it weird that there's so many absentee owners that rely on just management?
Mm-hmm.
How do you own a business and then you're that absentee, maybe checking in for 2 hours a week, unless your thing is flowing that smooth,
I think
which is so rare.
I think I think about it a little different. That's my
Sure.
definition of a business.
Uh-huh.
A business should run itself.
Okay.
Now, there's got to be oversight. There's
Sure.
got to be systems in place.
Uh-huh.
But if you have to be there more than 2 hours a week, you own a job, not
Correct.
a business.
So you're stuck in there. You're not working on it. You're working in it.
Exactly.
Correct.
When I show up to work, I show up to work on the business, not in it anymore. It's
Marketing, ways to
Exactly.
get accounts, right?
always having your finger on the pulse, but not necessarily.
Which comes from structures and systems and the right
structures and
people in
systems.
place to make sure you can do that. Because what sometimes they don't realize is if you're that open, you can just create more opportunity. And that's where, you take your business to another level.
That's generally where you get your best ideas too, when you have that freedom of thought. And it's it's one of those things where if you've ever worked in a corporate structure, or even not, if you're just it's one of those where if you're just an employee, I hate saying just an employee, but if you're an employee, it's hard to, and you've never been in management, if you've never been in ownership or just in entrepreneurship in general, most people don't understand what that free time is, and you're still working. It's just working differently. So even though you're not punching in on a clock, working your 40 hours, believe me, there's 80 hours in that week that went into it and thought. And it's just as exhausting. So where a lot of people can check out at 5, we're up till 2 a.m. trying to figure out where to take the business to the next level, how to problem solve, how to build stronger foundations. And it's a never ending.
Do you guys have those meetings, kind of like I'm sure you do, but just wondering, how frequently you guys are getting together, bouncing that off of each other, just kind of leadership meetings?
Well,
type
Joel
of
and I
thing.
do it just about every day.
Yeah, sure.
We, whether it's, even if it's
Informal,
a phone call,
yeah.
we're always talking. We're always in communication, and unless we're obviously on vacation or something like that. But,
Yeah, sure.
But we really are. We're kind of like family. Not just Joel and me, but like the people that work in our studio, even our photographers, we treat them like family.
Sure.
But more importantly, we're a team. I guess you could say equally as important, because the way we kind of think about it is, we play the A team. We play the starters, and if you fall back, we coach, we do all those things to get you back in the starting lineup. But we all win when we're bringing.
It's a hard conversation to have too, hurting people's feelings, emotions come into play. People aren't just robots, right? They get, hurt, but I'm sure you're showing them.
Well, the key of it is creating realistic expectations. So, Joel and I have had conversations with ourselves on how we're doing things. We're always coaching each other. We're always learning. We're always getting to a new level of success that we've never been at before. And it's new territory constantly. Even this year, because it's been so weird, it hasn't been as much of a growth year, but it's a new way of navigating the space. And
you still learned.
yeah,
Sure.
and
Yes, we did.
I like the idea when you talked about empowering your team, or at least empowering the right people. That's true. We want to empower the right people that are calling shots or making moves, but we also want to empower our people. We're huge on transparency. we can't fix what we don't know. So we want people to be comfortable coming to us, talking with us. If something went wrong on the wedding day, we want to know about it. Like after every wedding, we have this thing called a post-wedding forum where they can just kind of spill their guts on the day. It can be nothing but good. It can be nothing but bad. It could be a little bit of both, but we know how the day went. They can call us directly. It's just having that open forum where we can communicate, and that's honestly how we've built such a strong.
Do you guys talk to them about that form, or it's something you basically send them, email, whatever? Hey, let us know what your thoughts are.
Yep. So the way it works is generally after a wedding, they'll upload their wedding to us through the cloud, and that way our editing team can get to it. And the form is just as important as the footage. It's kind of like payment doesn't happen until that form is complete, and they know that. And that form has a lot of things. It lets us know how many files are on it, so we can match the cloud files to what they shot, so we're not missing anything.
Right.
But it also it lets us know if they have to pay for parking, just little things. And then there's a note section where they can talk about the day, like
Nice.
Because occasionally brides don't want an exit shot. And when the editor's in there like, oh my God, where's the exit shot?
Right.
We can revert back to our notes and be like, okay, there wasn't an exit shot. Or why aren't there formal bridal portraits? And the photographer can say like, oh, well, the bride just wanted to rush into the ceremony or the reception. They wanted to party. They didn't really care about the pictures. So if, the bride was drinking or they just wanted to party, we have those notes to revert back to. And they're like, oh yeah, that's right. We did do that.
Right.
So giving the team that empowerment to feel like they have a voice, and
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like an assembly line kind of.
Yeah.
You guys structured it in a way of here, you got all the info. The next person does their job, but if some info is missing there, it's going to be really hard for that person to do their job fully, and also maybe waste their time trying to put the pieces together if it's sloppy. So you expect it to be perfect on the front end, so it flows through the whole system.
And that's kind of, we put people in a position to win what they excel at. So like when we talk about like photographers doing everything when it comes to sales, marketing, all those consultations, and you talk about conversions, not all of them convert. So they're spending a lot of time trying to do that. So like with our sales team, that's all they do. They do sales. With our editing team, that's all they do. With our photographers, they shoot. That's all they do. And every part of the process is essential to the next part of the process.
Right.
And I think that's also why they excel, because they know exactly what they have to do. It's like, I wouldn't say no more, no less, but there's clear expectations of what's expected from them.
Correct.
And they excel in that.
Correct.
knowing
You
exactly
have a
what they
sales
do.
team, for example, and at what point do you tweak it if you see something not working? I mean, at what point do you jump in when you're like, hey, something has not been converting for some.
That is one of the hardest ones. But again, it really comes down to, I've found in sales there's certain metrics that I can measure that kind of tell me, like, one of the things is the length of the consultation. So we have ways to track in the sales team how long the salesperson was on the phone with each client.
Right.
And so inevitably, if I see that consultation time dropping below 30 minutes, I see a fade off in sales. When it's 40, 50 minutes an hour, it's, so when you I think that's how we win, is we're constantly digging into the numbers, constantly looking at new ways to measure. And I really like patterns. I really like numbers and patterns, and some of it's just a gut feeling sometimes based on the numbers. It's not like you pull it out of the air, but it's like something's happening here, and
Something,
look,
you feel it.
this number changed a little bit, and let's dig into that. Okay, now I'm going to go and audit a few of those sales calls and see what actually happened in them, and but. Again, it really all comes down to being able to track everything and everything through the entire business. The more you can track, the more info you have, the more you
Information
can,
is power.
the more you can head that stuff off.
The easier it is to make decisions sometimes too, or at least there's an extra variable there to help you make the decision.
Well, you hear the whole story then too.
Absolutely.
You hear the whole story. And our calls in our office are recorded, things like that. I like to play back what happens, in a certain conversation. Because then you hear the whole story, not just part of it. You need both sides.
Absolutely.
It's really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me ask you this question, if you don't mind. Just a business, thought. You guys took over Mike Moon. You bought him out, correct? At that point, he's at 20 maybe accounts a year. Seems like it's more of a hobby. It's not his full-time job, right? Why stick with the name?
Well, at the time I bought Mike Boone out, it was 2017.
Got it.
And we were doing probably, I'd say 150 events a year then, something like that.
So you guys are rocking and rolling.
And so at that point, we did an analysis on the numbers, and it was just too expensive to change the name.
Right.
And so we just decided, you know what, we're Mike Moon Studio. And if we change it to anything else, we love the idea that the company has that feel of an individual photographer. That's what we're always trying to portray. So I don't want to make us come off and sound like everything is calculated and just numbers all the time. A lot of it is, again, Todd and I have very different approaches. That's more my approach.
Right.
But he comes in and puts that human element on it and makes sure that those clients have an amazing experience that feels just like they went out and hired the best single individual photographer.
I like
did.
that. Yeah.
That's the whole idea is even that experience is systemized, but it doesn't come across that way.
Right.
It's not like a script. It's not like a, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Yeah, I was just curious. I think, it makes 100% sense.
I like the name too, to be honest. I mean, Mike Moon is just a different name. And then you tie in kind of your moonlight to that, which is awesome. And lighting is everything, right? I mean, even in this studio, so to speak, I know that the way that it's set up, we have the cameras pointed at us. We're also pointing at a window. The lighting's not the best, I'm no expert either.
The blinds help.
But yeah, they do for sure. But lighting is everything, right? I mean, when it comes to it. So I think it's really cool that you're, branding, using that, to your advantage. And that's just it, man. It's all about the shot, the lighting, and the system, you guys created, which is really awesome.
Most individual photographers, they do amazing things that they just don't tell anybody about. We make sure that the client knows, and there's more to it. We are much more systemized in all of those things, but it's about conveying.
Well, they
that.
probably, then the bride and groom, the family doesn't think someone's showing up with a camera and hitting a button, and then you're paying them, for what do we pay? This guy hit a button, there's so much more that goes into it, and you let them know exactly what's going on.
It's an oiled company.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, it's like with the flash. It's like it's more than just the flash and pretty lighting. It's just like, well, what does that mean? It's just like, well, if it's raining, what does it mean? Well, if it's raining, it means that we're going to get some insane shots where we can freeze every little speckle of rain and it just looks insane. What if it's
super
what
cool.
if it's dark outside? It's pitch black and can't see anything. Now we can backlight it and light it from the front, and now you've got these beautiful moonlight sessions. What if you're in a barn and the lighting, pardon my language, just sucks. It's just horrible. You've got some to the naked eye, you walk into a lot of these barns, it's orange wood, and it's kind of a colored wood, and if you don't know how to shoot that, all of a sudden everyone's skin is orange. It's not as pretty in pictures as it is in person, and that's where that lighting comes in. It's like, if you know how to work light, and it's magical. You can make it work in any scenario.
Do you guys ever have access to the venue beforehand to practice-ish?
I'm actually glad you asked. It's one of those, we love our relationships with our venues. We're preferred vendors at, what do you say, 20,
that's cool.
25 venues?
That's 20 or 25.
Yeah,
Something like that. And we have phenomenal relationships with them, and we shoot at them constantly.
Understood. Yeah. So
and that's it's another process that we're actually working on. So we can actually get the floor plans from all of our venues so that our photographers know going in, this is where we generally put lighting for receptions, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, we practice at venues all the time. We were actually at Finley Farmstead, phenomenal group of people. Cool. They let us take our team out there occasionally, and we'll do some practice sessions, and we have amazing couples. We have brilliant relationships with them. We had a couple. I don't know if they want me using their name, but we'll just say I won't say their names. But they were a phenomenal couple, and we've already shot their wedding. They had an amazing experience, and we'll just ask them like, hey, do you want to come help us with a training session? We'll get you some free photos,
Right.
and help us out. And they'll come out for 3 hours. And
Hell yeah.
you know, they're very patient with our photographers because they're just learning, or they're finalizing that final step before becoming a primary. And we rely on those venues to let us experience that space and put our photographers through the ringer. And so, yeah, we totally, a lot of times they do have access. Sometimes it's just giving the venues a call and saying like, hey, you know, we'd love to come by early. Our photographers, if they've never been to a venue, a lot of times will show up about an hour early, even if we haven't asked them to, just because they want to get a feel and flow for the space. They get an idea of where they're going to hang the dress. And
that's their
Smart too with the venue. People, we're having a wedding. Well, where? You know, it's like the first thing. And then they show up and they're like, man, you guys don't have a photographer. You got to check these guys out.
Exactly. And it's honestly, this business that we're in it's honestly all about relationships.
Oh, yeah.
It's about building strong relationships with our team, strong relationships with our couples, and strong relationships with the other wedding photography community, from wedding planners and coordinators to the venues themselves, to even just cake, you know, bakers and things like
Everywhere.
that.
Anything. Right.
Yeah.
Everything.
And because we really are a team in the fullest sense.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. If one part is horrible, they're going to focus on that, and you guys kind of get not overlooked, but it's like the wedding was a disaster because the cake dropped or the baker sucked.
I was going to say, have you ever been to a wedding where the cake fell over?
Yeah. I haven't, but I've heard some. I'm pretty sure you guys may have some crazy stories. Hopefully not, but nothing too embarrassing. But I'm sure people have fallen and made an ass of themselves.
I shot a wedding about 3 years ago, and it was I don't know who the cake maker was. Brilliant cake maker. And it was during August. It was one of the hottest summers we've had in a long time. And I remember we were just dripping wet, but they built this like Star Wars cake, and I think it was Darth Vader's head, and it was brilliant. And by the end of the night, it was just flatted, melted, like it just calmed down. Almost like an ice cream cake. But it was one of those. It's just, you experience things like that. Like how do you as a photographer or a filmmaker, you're kind of the therapist of the day.
Oh yeah.
So that's, you know, you have that assertiveness, but like good people know how to calm people down.
You guys should get you guys should get like a psychologist or a therapist on staff to bring. You know, we have a therapist here. If the bride needs to come in for just a minute, chat for 10 minutes, we got you.
You guys have a great, not only product, but your execution in the back end. And you waited 7 months for your for your package. If it was the best package in the world, it still wouldn't have been that good because you waited 7 months. Doesn't matter. You're already frustrated. You're walking into the room. You're like, give it to me already. So not only do you have the best product you're presenting up front, it's also the back end and delivery, which is so smooth. So it's a two-headed, maybe three-headed monster that you're providing, not just photography or filming. There's so much more to it. And that's what you guys are providing to your clients and customers.
And giving more than you promised to. We love doing that. It actually a lot of times doesn't take us 14 days on the photos. Right. We say 14 days, but then a lot of times they get them in 7 to 10. And so it's like they're still on their honeymoon, or they're just getting back and they're like, holy crap, I got my photos before I even got back from the honeymoon.
Incredible.
And so it's providing that customer experience that, it's just, and that, and the other thing about Mike Boone Studio that I'm really passionate about, I'm a value guy. I want to provide a really good high-end product at a price point that really makes sense. And because of our volume, we don't have to make a fortune on every single wedding. We do a few more. So, you can get photo and video with Mike Boone Studio that looks very similar to what you pay with some of the boutique photographers for just photo. And so we're one of the best values in Atlanta, and then we've got the systems dialed in, and there's a reason we've gotten to this point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it. When I first checked out the site, just the video, I didn't have video made at my wedding, and I was like, man, I wish I had video. The pictures were very dark, like her editing style. My wife's like, I wanted to redo them. I'm like, you can't redo the feeling you've had on a wedding day. You could, just for our purposes, but, it wasn't the best choice, and I wish we had known you guys.
Todd is actually the one that brought video into the company.
Cool.
That's how he actually
Video's
came
awesome,
on to start
man.
with.
Yeah, it's the new thing.
And as I honestly liked photo more in the
Right.
beginning.
Sure.
But I've kind of shifted. It's something about the way the video tells the story of the day and the way it can take you back there. And I tell brides the story all the time. It's 100% true. In my living room, when I got married, it was 13 years ago, video was different back then.
Yeah.
It wasn't the cinematic look that
Wasn't
you see now
4K.
as much. Well, and you could get something like that, but it was way more than I could have afforded back then. And so, but I have this picture that sits on my table in my, every man has a chair in his house.
Sure.
That's my spot, my table. And next to it, I've got a picture, and it's my grandparents at our wedding, and they're dancing, and they were in their mid 80s at the time.
Yeah.
I had never seen them dance before. And they're in focus. Everything around them's kind of blurred out. And I just cherish that photo because they're both gone now. I would kill to have that in motion. Absolutely
Yeah.
kill.
I know.
Video gains so much value over time as,
sure.
it just
I
takes
agree.
you back in a way that nothing else can.
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
like brings it to life.
Yeah.
You
And as Joel will say all the time to our couples, it's like photography's got that like immediate payoff, and the video increases in value over time. They both do.
Yeah, I
but,
agree.
Sure.
But video is one of those you watch it, and because it's kind of like it's an investment into watching, where pictures you can just see it quick.
Right.
That you'll watch it a couple times, and then you just kind of don't watch it for a while. But then someone in your family passes away, or you have kids. All of a sudden, it's just like, oh my God, this is so powerful.
Anniversary comes around. Hey, let's watch the wedding video and eat a large pizza and ice cream and
I like
be
your
slobs.
I like your stuff.
That sounds awesome to me.
Yeah.
No, it's incredible. I really, we appreciate you guys coming on,
Yeah.
telling us your story, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Not just from the
Thanks for
our
having
point
us.
of view, from the business point of view, combining the two.
Yeah, there's a lot
Looks
to
like
be
you guys
learned. A lot to be learned from any business, that you guys aren't just like showing up with the creative side. Like there's always a business side behind it with managing people, what your brand, what your look is, what your service is, just the system of Mike Moon Studio, the product. I think that's the really cool part, because people just think, oh, it's a great photographer. That's awesome. But if they didn't show up on time and they didn't have a backup plan and they didn't deliver everything, like I don't care how good the picture is. It's useless. Right. I just listening, I would, I feel like, just that the trust you guys, you enjoy doing what you do. And I feel that. That's everything.
Yeah, we feel it.
Thank you.
For sure, guys.
But
Thank you.
appreciate you guys. I'm going to put, obviously, your information when we post this and things, but MikeMoonStudio.com, man. Check out their videos and things. It's, they can make some magic for you guys. And anybody, I always plug this in the end, anybody, listening, anybody that has a story or business, or, even if they work for somebody else, they're passionate about what they do. We love bringing people on, connecting the community, building relationships. And, we just appreciate everybody that watches or comes on, honestly.
Thanks, guys.
So
Absolutely.
we appreciate
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, it was great.
It's a pleasure.